end of this coming to an end of the 6 chapters, which were primarily Karma Yoga, right? Third was Karma Yoga, fifth was Karma Yoga, and the sixth was a bit of Ashtanga Yoga, but those are also activities. So yes, Karma Yoga, and then now we're going to come into Bhakti, the essence of this of Bhagavad Gita. So 7 to 12 chapter is Bhakti Yoga, and then the last is Jnana, knowledge. That'll be a big. We have all 13, 14 talking about different modes of material nature and how things are in different modes. Determination in 3 modes and all. So there's going to be a lot of lot of knowledge gaining there in the last 6 chapters. Let me share my screen. Okay. So last week we ended with Arjun asking the question, saying that this seems to be a very tough process that you've explained to me, Krishna. Arjun said that hey Krishna, that yeah, I understand all this what you're telling me, but this is a pretty complicated work. It's easier to control the wind than to control the mind. And we read about the four characteristics of the mind. Chanchalam himana Krishna, parmathi balavad dridham. There were 4 characteristics: restlessness, wild, strong, and obstinate. So primarily, so that's the end of the common theme of this chapter. If you notice, controlling the mind. Right? The whole goal is to control the mind. The whole process of Ashtanga Yoga, starting from us, Yama and Niyama, the goal is to control the mind. So mind is the essence. And if one controls the mind with proper endeavor, everything is possible. So yes, that's where we ended 36th. So starting with 37. So now the question, now Arjun is going to ask a different question. Okay. So now what has happened is that Krishna has given him all these principle steps, hey, yama, niyama, dharana, and samadhi, you reach samadhi, and all that. And now Arjun is thinking in his heart that Krishna, this process is too difficult. So I'm guessing I won't be able to achieve the final, I won't be able to reach the final end of it. So what is going to happen to me if I fail and fall down? What's going to happen to me? That's the question that Krishna is asking. Arjun is asking Krishna now. So he's saying, Arjun said, "Oh Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism?" So what happens to that person? Arjun is asking Krishna, right? So because Krishna, when Arjun said that this mind is very tough to control, Krishna says, hey, you be patient, be persistent, and be detached. Abhyasa and vairagya. Those are the things that. And so here in this verse, what Arjun is saying is that person has shraddha, the person has faith. Okay, that's something that Arjun is accepting. Yes, I have faith in what I'm practicing, right? But then it's chalita manasa, my chalita. So the word chalita is similar to the word chanchalam that we read earlier, right? Chanchalam hi manha Krishna, parmathi balavad dridham. So they both are related, these words, chalita and chanchala. Right? So chanchala is restlessness, as we discussed. But then chalita means go off completely, just never coming back kind of a situation. Which something that takes us off the path of yoga completely. It's a mental deviation. We talked about that story early on. I think was it in Nectar of Instruction, that there was a guy who boarded a plane and there were 2 devotees sitting beside him, and they offering him prasadam, and they were talking about bhakti, and he was just getting a bit uneasy. But then he had left the process of bhakti because somebody had said something to him. So that was chalita manasa, that his mind just took him off bhakti completely. So there's a mental deviation, as you're saying, right? So Arjun is asking, what will be their gatim? Kam gatim Krishna gacchati. What gati? Gati means the fate, destination. What is going to be the destination of such people? Yes. So gati, this word comes across the scriptures a lot. So now Prabhupada, what Prabhupada is talking about in the purport, self-realization is sought by the path of knowledge, by the practice of the eightfold system or bhakti yoga. So Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So there are three ways of gaining on the path of knowledge. Okay. We've been talking about this chapter being the Ashtanga Yoga part, and then knowledge, and then Bhakti. Yes. Okay. So this was following any of the above mentioned three methods. One is sure to reach the supreme goal sooner or later. What Prabhupada means by this, if we don't understand that these paths are connected to Krishna, it might be a long journey for us. So if I don't know that it's this, if I'm just thinking that Ashtanga Yoga is all in all, I will keep going in Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. I'll be in a mode of that same mode. I'll never be able to go beyond that. It's only when I understand that the process of Ashtanga Yoga is meant to take me to Krishna, then only I will reach the supreme goal. Okay, that's what Prabhupada means, that these three methods can also. It doesn't mean that, oh, we'll become a Jnana Yogi and we'll go to Krishna. As long as we don't understand that all these yogas are connected to Krishna, I will never be able to reach the final goal. Okay, and Prabhupada is mentioning from the second verse, second chapter, sorry. This was asserted by the Lord in the second chapter. Even a little endeavor on the transcendental path offers us a great hope for deliverance. Neha vikrama nasho asti pratyavayo na vidyate swa alpam api asti dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Swa alpam. Swa alpam means small. Swa means, it's a small part. So it's the smallest part even. Swa alpam, very small. Swalpam asi dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Mahato means big. Bhayat means fear. So all the fears, that even a little bit of bhakti, if we bring bhakti into any of those three mentioned, or the other two except bhakti, when we bring bhakti into them also, that can also give us a great hope for deliverance. So so the reason Prabhupada is bringing it here is that, he's talking about unsuccessful transcendentalists. So people who are on the path of self-realization, okay, with faith. So so people who can be on self-realization with faith can be Jnana Yogis also, can be Ashtanga Yogis also, and Bhakti Yogi. So that Shraddha can be in different paths also, in those other paths. That is why Prabhupada is explaining all those paths, and he's saying that, but we all have to connect them to Bhakti. Otherwise, the goal is not achieved. Let me see if there's anything else there. Yoga Chalita Manasa. Yeah, okay. So this is this is more like a preliminary characterization, this verse. Sorry, not this. Worldly minded, resist world, and thus 18. Okay, yes. Okay, so in this verse, Arjun is giving a much broad over. His question is more broad. Okay, that, hey, Krishna, what happens to those people, who fall off the path? But in the next one, Arjun becomes a bit more specific. He becomes more. He elaborates upon his question. So earlier he gives a preliminary characterization, and now he's going to be elaborate. Now he's saying that, O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? So here now he's becoming more specific, that, hey, I thought spiritual life is going to be successful for me and I'm going to succeed in it. But then somewhere down the road, I got demotivated. So I gave up material life, but now I've not been able to be successful in spiritual life either. So what's happening? And the analogy being given here is of a riven cloud. So what happens is that a small cloud breaks out from a bigger cloud, okay? And it's just going to probably float for some time and then go and merge in another cloud. That's generally what happens. So that's what happens. But during the transition phase, a wind blew and it took that small cloud away completely. So it was neither in the original cloud from which it broke, and it could neither reach the other cloud where it was supposed to go. Okay. So Arjuna is saying that we'll become like that. Right. So that's what Arjuna is saying. Okay, so that so what's the word he's using? Chinna Brahma. So Chinna means broken, torn apart, and Abrahma is cloud. So a cloud that has torn away from the big array of clouds that it was a part of. Okay. So similarly, we leave material to come to spiritual. But what happens if I'm not even able to complete that my journey to that spiritual life which I've come to? I've not been. So this is not a theoretical question. It's a serious one, because we all have taken a big risk, big challenge up here by taking up bhakti, and our future is dependent on our spiritual practices. Right? So it's important that we understand what Krishna, what happens. It's a more practical question that Arjuna is bringing up here. Let's see what Prabhupada is highlighting here. Okay, so Prabhupada is saying that there is a path of economic development, and then there's a path of transcendence. So there are two paths, and we can leave one, come to the other, but then not be also successful in the other. And then third part. So now Arjuna's question is spreading through 3 verses. This is a much elaborate question. Generally, Arjuna asks the question in only 1 verse and he stops there, but here he's asking in 3 verses. So this is the third part of his. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Okay. So now, etan me samshaya. What is he saying? Etan me samshayam. Samshayam means doubt. Okay. Chetum means to destroy, to dispel my doubt. Okay. Asheshete, ashesheta, asheshita, asheshata. Asheshata means in a asheshata, without remaining, nothing shesh should be there. It should be complete. And no one can remove this doubt. Okay. So now after describing this doubt, his doubt, he says, Krishna, alone you can clear it, right? In the second chapter, we read the verse, the 7th verse, Karpanya doshopahata subhava. So in that verse, what does Arjun say? Prachami tvam dharma samudha cheta. So there also he says the same thing, that you can, only you can answer my queries. I'm surrendering to you because you have the answers, Krishna. So apart from Krishna, no one can answer his doubts. So in one sense, he's in second chapter, he accepted Krishna as his guru, and he's just reiterating his position as a disciple, as being subservient to Krishna, by repeating that Krishna, I have these doubts and I know only you can solve them. Prichami in second chapter, 7th word first. Prichami tvam sarva, prichami tvam dharma samudha cheta. So he's bringing a similar request back now in this chapter, in this verse also. Okay, so now Krishna will start explaining. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So neither here or in the next world, person ever meets destruction, right? So, so Krishna is kind of just, he's just motivating Arjun here that, hey, nothing is going to happen. Right? So one who does his prescribed duties according to the system that has been given by Krishna, that person doesn't perish. Right? And Prabhupada, in the purport, he will elaborate upon human qualities, is that? Right. So he's going to talk about human qualities in here. And he's talking that there are regulated and non-regulated. So non-regulated are primarily karmic activities. Right? But then there are regulated who are, who are Gyanis and Ashtanga Yogis. So they are regulated. Those two sections Prabhupada is going to talk about here. And then in the this part, so people who are two sections, regulated and non-regulated. Non-regulated, they're all simply engaged in bestial sense gratification. And then the other one who are regulated, there's a path of auspiciousness Krishna is mentioning. There also there are three categories. They're karma kandis. So they have some concept of God and the superior higher power. So they are following the scriptural rules and regulations, but to enjoy material prosperity. And then they are those who are trying to find liberation. So they're Jnana yogis and they are Ashtanga. And then those who are devotees of Krishna. Okay. Okay. And then Prabhupada is further saying Sakam Karmi and Nishkam Karmis. Those who are fruitive workers and those who desire no fruit for sense gratification. So these people are still following the rules and regulations of the scriptures. Okay. So for material enjoyment, so they can be Sakam and Nishkam. Oh, let's see what else Prabhupada has. Okay. So yeah, so Krishna is telling Arjun here that they don't fall down. They never, the hard work that you have put in is never lost. That's what Krishna is highlighting here. And Prabhupada is quoting this verse from the first canto, 5th chapter here. Taktva sadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apako atha pate tato yadi yatra kavabhadram abuddham ussikim guvartha apto abhajatam swadharmata. If someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. Right? So a non-devotee, he might do his duties perfectly. I'm perfect at work. I fully dedicate 8-10 hours every day at work. I'm excelling. Everybody appreciates me. But then I don't have any consideration that there is a superior power who's controlling me. There is a higher power whom I have to be subservient to. There's a concept of yagya. Krishna talked about yagya in the 3rd chapter, right? Yagya shisthasi in santo. So all that is not, that person is not even, has not yet conceptualized all that. All the work he's doing is going to be lost here. He'll not be able to take the benefit of that in the next life. At the same time, but if a person who's taken up the shelter of Krishna, even though I'm not perfect, even though I'm not able to execute what I'm being told to execute, right? But then I have a desire. Okay, I have a desire that Krishna, I will do whatever it takes, but I can't do it right now. So then, when I cultivate that desire, all the resources come to help me from Krishna within my heart. So going back to our word, sincerity. Right? If I have been sincere with taking shelter of Krishna, then Krishna manifests in my life, and even though I'm not perfect, it's my success is guaranteed on that path. All we have to do is just show up. That's what he's saying. Taking shelter of Krishna is that just showing up. We just have to keep going. And that's how we become strong in bhakti. Every day I wake up, I feel inadequate. I feel that, oh my God, again, 2 hours of chanting. But then we just keep doing it again and again, again and again. I take responsibility. I take responsibility for my vows. I take responsibility for my life and doing service. Then everything is perfect. Right? That's the beauty of the process. Not necessarily worrying about the outcome, but just working. The work that I'm putting in the right amount of right effort and right amount of work, and then everything becomes success for me. That's why Prabhupada is bringing out this verse to elaborate upon what Krishna is saying here in this verse. Any thoughts, any comments here? We're going to get into some more details about those people who fall down. Anything from anyone here before we move forward?
Haribol.
Anybody? Haribol, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead. Oh, you muted yourself, Prabhu, Sankirtan Prabhu. You're on mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're on mute.
So one thing I highlighted in this, because in our dialogue of human verbiage, we always say loser, and Prabhupada says there, one's not a loser. And when I saw that, I said, okay, I'm not a loser.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. I mean, you have to see, like you were just saying, just show up. I'm not a loser. I'm happy about that part, you know? He was how could he be talking like that way back then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this process, bro. That's something that really motivates me every day. Unfortunately, in this world, we define success in different ways, right? But in bhakti, the very endeavor itself is considered to be a success. That's what Krishna is telling us here. So I have to change my definition of success. So we just be ourselves, we do our duties, we depend on Krishna, right? So my only expectation is to perform my duty to the best of my ability. If Krishna wants me to go through, meet some people who are envious of me, fine, Krishna, this is what you want, I'll go through it. But just being dependent, right? So then everything becomes perfect as we move forward. Yeah, then we're not a loser anymore. We're always successful. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. What else? Anybody else? Anybody? Let's see who all are there today. Yes, please. Go ahead, please.
Prabhu, so you're saying that all our pious activities, if in this birth, is never lost when we take birth, or if we take birth again. So in the next birth, the pious activities will carry us through that birth alone, or if we take birth, after we take birth over and over again?
It's cumulative, Prabhu. It's cumulative. Let's say you succeeded 25% this life. Next life, you started 26. Might be you are in a condition where you can't go beyond 26 in your next life, right? Let's take the example of Bharat Maharaj. He reached 80, 90%, and then he goes down into an animal life next life. Animal life, no karma. So nothing. Even if he was at 80, he started at 80 when he became Jada Bharat again. So, but then Krishna was so merciful that Krishna let him remember his past lives. So he knew what mistakes he had made. So sorry, but what I'm saying is, to answer your question, is that it's a cumulative effect and it never goes away. Wherever I left it, probably 2 lives ago, I did bhakti. In my last life, I became a dog. In this life, I come back, I become Premadhan Das. So I started from where I was in my life before I was a dog. Nothing lost. Was that your question?
Thank you.
Okay. Was that your question? Sorry.
Yes, Prabhu. That's exactly what I was asking. You answered it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's what Krishna is going to highlight in the following verses. We will see that how. I won't open up the secret, but yes. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
Yes, Prabhuji, this is Rasala
Yes.
Krishna Das.
Yes,
so Krishna says that, on the same topic, the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So the what I was wondering is why. I mean, I question whether just because you're born into a rich aristocracy that it's conducive for one's bhakti. I would think not necessarily. So I wanted to get your thoughts about this.
That's correct, Prabhu. It's not necessary. So what is that? Krishna can only give us an environment. Just like a gardener can give a fertile ground, can give the fertilizers, can probably give water, But whether the seed will fructify or not is dependent on the seed. Similarly, Krishna, because of whatever effort I had put in my last life, Krishna gave me a much conducive environment. I was born in a family where I didn't have to work, think so much about money. There are so many families where kids have to start working early in their lives because their parents either don't earn much or one of their parents is dead. So Krishna gives the environment. Whether I use it for my benefit or not is completely up to me. The tiny free will that I have defines that, Prabhu.
Right, but being born into a family of righteous people, that's probably more conducive to bhakti than being born in a family of rich aristocracy. I mean,
Yes, yeah. So it can be, so by righteous people, you can also mean, when we say righteous, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are practicing bhakti. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So it could be that, so they follow the Vedic culture. Let's say they have this concept of that, okay, there is a, righteous. So I'm trying to frame the right statement for it. They could be practicing Vedic rituals, but they're not necessarily practicing bhakti. But they are far better than people who are completely animalistic in their life. That's what the word righteous broadly means here.
okay.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are pure devotees. So these two verses, I'll explain this further, is that this, so Krishna is talking about, so Arjun asked Krishna, unsuccessful yogi. But Krishna has divided into two sections. Unsuccessful yogi after a small period of bhakti, or of these practices. And a person who has practiced this for many, many years. 50, 60 years he or she practiced. Still, they couldn't culminate the bhakti process. But so they both will get different results, right? If a person who did bhakti for a year versus a person who did bhakti for 60 years, if they both get the same results, it's very demotivating. So they get different results. So a person,
Right.
so this verse is talking about, so this is the next verse we are talking, 41. So this verse is talking about people who have done bhakti for a short period of time. And the next one is for a longer period of time.
Okay.
And I'll elaborate upon it as we go forward, Prabhu.
All right. Thanks.
But yeah, so righteous doesn't necessarily just mean that they are pure devotees. Righteous can mean they practice Vedic, they are practitioners of Vedic culture. Many devotees, I know there are many people who come to ISKCON, they've been born into Catholic families. And they're hardcore Catholic families, and their parents, going church goers, they're good, pious people. So that's also a righteous family. They don't have the full understanding or the bigger picture of what the whole concept is, but then they are still in a much better mode than people who work like a donkey for 8 hours, come home, sit in front of the TV, drink beer, and go to sleep. They're there. So righteous can mean a higher, elevated category also. Okay. What else do we have? Who else has a comment, a question, a thought? Please speak up. We're on verse 41. We'll probably be wrapping it another 15-20 minutes, so we have plenty of time. So any comments, anything that's on your mind, please bring it up. It's always good to open up with questions. Questions make us stronger. Yes, true.
There's another thing that I always thought. I said, well, what's the deal with us here? But Prabhupada used to say that America was a very aristocratic society. We're opulent here in so many ways, and I didn't really understand a lot of that. But then when I went to different parts of the world, just a few of the spots, I saw how different it was. Everything's minimized and capsulized, or not so progressive or opulent. All the things that I sort of took for granted, I saw weren't even existent anywhere else. So, many people born in America were born into aristocracy. And then what happened is that there's a ton of them in the 60s that were looking for the answer. They were looking for something, and everyone was falling short. And Prabhupada came to the rescue. And it was explained too that the saving grace of America is because we accepted Lord Chaitanya's movement. because
Yeah.
because along with all the aristocratic opulence, the degradation and the height of our culture is killing animals and stuff. You know, so many things that you'd say, oh my, this has to end, and we got our karma coming quicker than we can think. But the mercy and the benediction is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You know, our society everywhere. He knew Prabhupada came here, and it fulfilled the you know the proclamation that everyone would hear. So you know, this is the mercy of being just born in an aristocracy. And I was born in a Catholic family. They raised me, but I said, you know, okay, so what else? I mean, when Jesus said, "There's so much I need to tell you. There's so much you don't know," I said, "Okay, what is it?" I actually asked that when I was 18. What is it? And nobody really had the answer for me. And so I said, I'm not doing nothing. And then when I found this Krishna consciousness, oh my gosh, it was just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
So we can see that, you know, America is that so many things that like Prabhupada said, the Bhagavad Gita has the answers to everything, socially, culturally, historically, everything. It's there. And
Yes, it's all there, Prabhu. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yep, it's all there.
So, Prabhu, the devotee who is following the four regulatory principles and doing the Harinam Japa, whatever rounds he is doing throughout his life, it's a surety that he will take a human birth next life, right?
Yes. Well, I can't assure you anything. I'm just saying Krishna says so.
Yes.
I don't. Yes. Krishna.
Maharaj also did the same thing, right? Even though he fell for that deer, but still he was doing it. It was not that he completely gave up everything and became materialistic person. He was still doing his prescribed duty, means devotional service, but I think so not to that level. But he became
Oh yeah, yeah. He was doing actually as a deer. He went and stayed in the ashram where people were practicing, bhakti. So then he would eat prasadam. They would offer him prasadam. They knew that, oh, this deer is hanging around here. So even in the body of a deer, he knew what mistake he had made in his last life. So yeah, so he was picking up from where he had left in his last life.
My question is, when he was doing his devotional service, I understand he got he got carried away with the deer. That part I understand, but still he was doing his devotional service. It was not like he completely gave up everything and he started enjoying like a materialistic person. He was doing that, but not to that extent. He had fallen down from his very high expectations, but he was still doing a good amount of devotional service. So, and as you mentioned, right, anybody who does the devotional service is for sure Krishna promises he'll take a human birth. So in Bharat Maharaj case, why it happened, I understand his desire was he was so much passionate about the deer, but he had his quota of his share of devotional service, like 20%, 80%. Then why did it not carry him to the human birth? Just
Yes.
because he had that desire at the end of his life, that passion for compassion for a deer, he took a animal life, Prabhu. Then what about my entire quota of devotional service that I have done, that 80%?
So in the second chapter of Bhagavatam, we are told, first canto, Etvan Yoga Sankhibhyam Jnana Karma Anavritam Janma Labha Parapumsan Ante Narayana Smriti. The goal is to remember Krishna at the last time of your this life. And then Krishna says this in the 8th chapter also, that Yam Yam Vapi Smarana Bhavam Tyajanti Ante Kalevaram Tam Tam Evati Konteya Sada Tad Bhava Bhavita. Whatever consciousness you leave this body, you will find that in the next. First of all, understand that your consciousness in your last moment is going to define our next life. His consciousness was fully in the deer. But then the other aspect to think of, sometimes Krishna, can also teach through his devotees. So it doesn't mean that everybody, I was just giving you an example of Bhishma Maharaj, right? Bhishma Maharaj had to suffer so much. So somebody can ask, Bhishma Maharaj is a pure devotee. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. And he's suffering. He's literally lying on a bed of arrows for days. So why is he suffering? Sometimes Krishna uses his own devotees to set an example to others, because he knows that these devotees are not going to go anywhere. But then he can use them as examples because their devotees have completely surrendered themselves to Krishna. So sometimes it's not necessarily the fault of that one person that they're suffering. So that's one aspect also to understand. that Krishna can sometimes use them as an example. Then also you have to understand that sometimes Krishna gives, even to his loved ones, Krishna can give a little bit of chastisement. If Krishna was not thinking of him, Krishna wouldn't have given him a memory of his last life. That in the deer form also he was remembering what was in his last life. So it's not like a black and white that, hey, you practice 40 years of bhakti, you're going to be perfect in your next life. It doesn't work that straightforward. But yes, exceptions are always there. But the standard rule is what you have explained, right? That yes, you do bhakti, you become a human in next life. That's the rule. But then some rule can have exceptions also here and there. But those exceptions don't become a rule in themselves. They're always an exception. So those are a few ways to look at what happened to Bharat Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
And understand that Bhagavatam, not everything given in Bhagavatam is a message for us to memorize. Remember that also, please. And I just want to highlight that. You'll find many stories in Bhagavatam, they might be just coming out of the blue. Hey, why is this being brought up in this? So some of them are just in continuation. They're just like existing there. They're just a part of a story. You just take them as they're coming to you, incidentally. Don't try to find a meaning. We don't have to find a meaning for every single thing that's happening in Bhagavatam. Not everything is going to be perfect. Bhagavatam will present everything. And as Bhagavatam is supposedly like Mohini Murti, right? There was an incarnation of Krishna as Mohini Murti. Mohini Murti came to the demigods. They looked at her lustily. They wanted to have, oh, wish I could have this lady. She goes to the demigods. The demigods understand that, oh, this is the Supreme Lord who has come to. So Bhagavatam can also give us what we are looking for also sometimes. So if we try to look at everything very analytically in that, then it might be that sometimes we might even take things that are not supposed to give us a message, are not meant for that. We might also start looking for messages in them also. I just wanted to bring that out. Not that you're doing it, but I'm just putting a broader picture into Bhagavatam also. There are many things in Bhagavatam that we might not understand or might not be completely explained or something. So we just look at them incidentally happening, we read them and we move forward. And when the right time will come, Krishna will give us the realization and explain it to us. Okay, last call. If anybody has anything, if not, we'll move forward. No more? Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have another
Yes.
question about evolution of the
Gopal.
soul.
Yes, Gopal.
So I mean, we don't know the history of the soul, I guess, from time of creation. It's everlasting and it can never be destroyed according to Krishna. So what I guess we've never gotten to this point. The soul has never gotten to this point that where we are in this birth, according to our pious activities. So I mean, this has got to be a long time since since the soul has been created. And it seems like it's a very slow process, I guess, for some of us. And my question is, how, you mentioned that demigods, when they get to the heavenly planets, they come back down, after their pious activities. So what to speak of us, I guess, from the activities that we're doing, whether we consider it pious or not, in this birth, we can look like this for a very long time, before we're able to go back to spiritual world.
So your voice was breaking somewhere. So I didn't get your question. I heard parts of it.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, it may take a very, very long time for us to go back to the spiritual world. Just looking back at at how the pace, I guess some of us are moving, at least for me, with bhakti and pious activities and all these things, and looking forward, it's going to take a very, very, maybe many births for us to achieve that that final stage.
The path that you have already taken, it was much longer than the path you're now going to take forward. So what I'm saying is, the path that is left between you and Krishna is much, much smaller than the path that you have already walked. From the moment, that's why we are called, as you're saying, we are called Anadi Bahirmukha, that we have been attracted to this external features from time immemorial. There is no factual, record of when we came to this, and there's no sense in that. But because you are now doing bhakti sincerely, that clearly indicates that you have walked a long distance. Devahuti in the 3rd canto, chapter 33, verse number 7, she says, Aho bata sau pachato gariyan ya jivagre vartate nama tubhyam te pus tapaste juhu shashnurarya brahmanuchur te nama ghnanti yete. So what she's saying, Aho bata, that, oh, what a glorious, how glorious this person is who is chanting your names. She's saying to her son Kapila Muni, Aho bata sau pacha. Sau pacha is a dog eater. That even if a dog eater is chanting your name, so that means that he has come through all the paths. And what are those paths? Tepus tapas. Tapas means all the austerities. Tepus tapas, the Juhu Shashnur Arya. Aryan is a person who's perfect in Vedic knowledge. Tepus tapas, the Juhu Shashnur Arya. Brahmanuchur te nama grananti. Brahman. And there was one more. I forgot the 3rd part in it. So he's done all the austerities. He's done gone to all the holy lakes in the world, and he has done all the Vedic austerities. And now he's chanting the Krishna's mantra. So what I wanted to establish by quoting that verse is that we have done all that part already. You, in your past lives, you have perfected the knowledge in Vedas. You have lived lives that were perfect and conducive for your spiritual growth. You have done all the austerities possible. So you have already done everything. That is, after that, you have come into this life of where you have taken up bhakti sincerely. So you don't have a very long path, at least not as long as you have already walked, Prabhu. That's why I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, you've actually answered both questions exactly as I was contemplating. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty, as Prabhupada has taught us, somebody asked this question to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, how much time will it take for me to be a pure devotee? Prabhupada thought for a minute and said 40 years. Then one day another devotee was asking Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, you can be in a second. So, as I was saying earlier, we have to take responsibility for my spiritual life. I have to take responsibility for my vows. If I take that, this very life, we all can go back home, back to Godhead. That's the beauty of the process. And Krishna is very, very eagerly waiting for us. Tell yourself all the time. He's so eagerly waiting. He's more eager than you are eager to go back, or even I am eager to go back. He's more eager to have me back. So it's just that tiny veil of lack of commitment that I'm going through is what is stopping me from meeting Krishna. Okay, so let's get back to our verse. Yes, so now coming to this verse. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So as I was saying, that this Krishna has divided this section now into 2 types of people. So one who practice for long and one who practice for a short time. So this one is for a short one. What happens to that person? Many years of enjoyment on planets of pious living entities. And what is that? Swargaloka. Right? So right, we are on Bhuloka, Bhuvar, Swarga, Jana, Maha, Tapa. Yeah, so those 7, and then we have 7 in the lower. Atal, Vital, Sutal, Mahatal, Rasatal, Patal. So 7 lower, 7 higher. So when we are unsuccessful, even after practicing for a short time, we start going upwards. Right? So for example, the people who are in a mode of goodness, right? Krishna will talk about this in the 14th chapter, 14, I think it's the 26th verse. Urdhvam gachanti satvastha. Urdhvam means going upwards. Urdhvam gachanti satvastha, madhya tishtanti rajasa, jaganna guna vrittistha, yato tamsa. So yes, so when we are doing our activities properly, but it's a short period of time, we start moving upwards. Yeah. So we can go to the Swargaloka. of pious living entities. So we enjoy there. Swargaloka is full of enjoyment. There is immense sensory power there that never diminishes. Just imagine that, right? So here we have so many, we don't have perfection. Also, like, it's not a place, this world, this material world, this particular bhuloka, it's neither so good that I get too much attached to it, and neither it's so bad that I get completely, I start abhorring it, I start hating it. It's somewhere in the middle. And that's perfect situation for us. For us, we also are tatastha, right? We are also in the middle. We are not external or interior energy of Krishna. So this bhuloka is the best for us living entity. But when we go upwards, our sensory powers become strong. So I can enjoy this bodily senses much more efficiently, right? The qualities of sense objects become exquisite. For example, here, probably the dishes that you like might be limited. Probably those number of dishes that are available in the Swargaloka will be much higher. The variety of arrangement for enjoyments can be higher. They talk about Bhagavatam all the time talks about aeroplanes that are as big as cities flying across. So all that there's so much more enjoyment up there, right? But then once you have enjoyed there, then you come back. Right? And this will be further explained in the 9th chapter. Krishna will explain this, that after you have enjoyed in the Swargaloka, you come back into this material world again. So it's more like a consolation prize given to somebody for practicing for some time. I didn't cross the finish line, but I did. I initially I was an enthusiastic participant. I had desire, but then I had desires in my heart. So Krishna said, okay, Prem Dham, you want to enjoy, you go to Swarga. Okay. You have so many pending desires in your heart. Okay, you go enjoy. After some enjoyment, Prem Dham's buddhi will come back. He say, Prem Dham, you were chanting in your last life. At least you were trying to, even if you were not perfect. You were trying to. You are a yogi. You are a bhakti practitioner. When that clicks to me, the light goes up. Then I will come back here. And then what will happen? I'll be born in a family. What is the family Prabhupada Krishna is saying? Shuchinam, and the other one is Srimatam. These two are the families that are being talked about here. Shuchinam and Srimatam. Shuchinam means of the pious, Srimatam means of the prosperous. And Prabhupada has further translated as Shuchinam is born in a righteous family, and Srimatam is somebody who's a rich aristocracy. Okay, so Shuchinam, as I was saying earlier, follower of Vedic culture. So, so when at least being born in a person who's practicing some Vedic culture is much better than being born in a completely materialistic person's house. Right? So, so it's much better to do that. Much better to do that. And then aristocratic rich family is also, so the family might be aristocratic, right? But then that person is also has some concept of dharma. Okay. It doesn't mean that they're also completely materialistic, even though they might be very rich, but they still will have some concept of dharma, right? If you notice, I think I mentioned this in the last class, Ambani's in India, they have opened up a cultural center. And I remember I wanted to see that video. I saw His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj and Gaur Gopal Prabhu somewhere showing up. So I thought I want to see what's going on there. So I looked it up. So they are aristocratic families, but they have some concept of dharma, even though they're not perfectly dharmic, or it's not like they have accepted a guru and they're getting detached. No, that's not the case. But they have some concept of dharma, right? So there's a consolation prize for who practice for a short time and fall down. So Prabhupada in the purport says one thing that, so Prabhupada is saying, but those who do not persevere to such an extent and do fail because of material allurements are allowed by the grace of the Lord to make full utilization of their material propensities. So I have material propensities, I go up to Swargaloka and then I come back. And Prabhupada is saying, persevere. So perseverance is necessary. Prabhupada bringing out that word perseverance. As soon as I make a firm commitment, Krishna and all his personified potencies will come to assist us in ways we cannot even imagine. That is the beauty of it. That is why one mantra that we all can keep is that what is that? Assume it can be done. So what assume it can be done means that the moment you make a commitment to something, then Mahaprabhu and Krishna, they immediately start manifesting and start making things happen in our lives. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu is like a capitalist. Okay? And the moment I set a goal, the moment I become committed, Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he cuts a check for me, a check of bhakti. So assume it can be done and you work backward from there. The reason we assume it can be done, the reason we make that commitment is that I'm not the doer. I'm just fully dependent on Krishna. When I make that commitment that Krishna, I'm yours and I'm going to be dependent on you, Krishna immediately manifests in our lives. And we all can look at Krishna's intervention in our lives at every moment. You'll be surprised. You'll be asking, was that Krishna? And you say, oh yeah, this was Krishna's hand for sure. So that's what the value of that perseverance, the value of making a firm commitment comes in from. But, okay, there's a caveat there. I have to surrender before that help comes. That is why Prabhupada is saying persevere. First, we make that firm commitment and then Krishna's help comes. So there are three stages in the process. First is grace. Okay. Krishna gives us the opportunity to practice devotional service. That itself is Krishna's mercy coming right, even before I asked for it. Krishna is very mystical. I was living in Denver, and the temple was like a 5-minute walk from my house, but I never went there at least for the first 4 or 5 years I was there in Denver. And between the temple and my house was a park, a big park. And I would take Keshav was probably a year or so, and I would take him to the park, and there I would see this. Her name is Nidra Mataji. She's Prabhupada disciple. My God, she's effulgent. She's practically like a demigod, walking on the streets there. And I saw her, and she would be giving books to people. And I saw so many times that somebody would take a book from her and throw it away. Somebody would, disrespect her. And I never saw her, being kind of losing it. She was always smiling. And I thought, oh my God, what does she have that is making her so happy? And that's why I started going to the temple. I was frustrated. I was in my PhD there, and I was so frustrated with my PhD, with my professor. But so what I'm saying is that Krishna gives us an opportunity all the time. He's giving us opportunities. So that's the first thing. But then once he gives us that opportunity, then a choice comes. Then I have to make a choice, right? That I accept that opportunity gratefully, and then I practice devotional service wholeheartedly. And then when I do that, make that choice, then Krishna opens the gates completely. Earlier, he was just sending some tiny bits here and there, but then he opens up the gate. He grants that constant inner happiness, the conducive external environment that we are looking for, so that we can share it with others. We can be committed to our vows, committed to our spiritual life. But then the choice has to happen before this grace, the final grace happens. So that's something to keep in mind. Perseverance, that's Prabhupada is using the word perseverance. Every word Prabhupada uses has so much value in it. We could spend days and days just going through one purport. Okay, so the next part, the next group of people who practice for a long time, Prabhupada is highlighting it, after a long practice of yoga. Okay? He takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare. So, if someone was practicing for a long time, he doesn't come back to bhakti after taking a detour, like what Bharat Maharaj did. Okay, there was a slight detour there. When we are dedicated fully, and then we come to bhakti. In the earlier verse, we were practicing material life and then coming to bhakti. Yeah, you go to Swarga, you enjoy, and then you come to bhakti. Here, you immediately come to bhakti, or to a family that is practicing bhakti already. But Prabhupada is saying this birth is, not Prabhupada, sorry. Krishna is saying this birth is very, very rare. That is why children who are born in the Hare Krishna movement are very special. there are demigods who are waiting in queue to be born in a devotee family. All these things might seem very fantastical when we hear them, but there are verses in Bhagavatam. There's a verse in Bhagavatam that says that demigods are waiting to come down to this material world, to this earthly planets, to be born in devotee families so that they can be liberated. It's not that somebody has become a demigod, so he's surely going to go back home, back to Godhead. No, that's not the way. Indra does so much nonsense. He sends his rain when Krishna refuses to offer him a sacrifice, and he fights with Krishna when Krishna takes the Parijata tree from the heavenly planets. So they're not perfect. They are higher beings, but they're not perfect. So that's why they are waiting to be born in devotee families. So it's a great responsibility as parents. We all have, whoever of us is our parents, and we see ourselves as facilitator. That Krishna has sent me a person, a soul, who did a lot of practice in his or her last life, and in this life he's starting right from the birth. Prem Dham started when he was, had lived a major chunk of his life already. But then, kids who are born in bhakti, they started from right day one, right? So we see them as special souls, children who are born here. Such families, and Prabhupada is talking about such families who get such children. So it's a mindset Prabhupada is talking about, that a child who's born in such families, he gets a spiritual impetus from the very beginning. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters to their children. That's what it means here. So they, as parents, we give our children proper culture in spiritual life, in education. We give them guidance, right? We create an environment of I think Prabhupada is using he's using tradition and training. It's an important part here. Tradition and training. So there is tradition. So we have been talking about, right? What was that? Thinking. There is abhyas and vairagya, right? We talked about that. So there's a practice part in our process, and one is the knowledge part. So training is the practice part, and tradition is the knowledge part. So that's we give both to our children when we have come here. So so the Prabhupada is using the word spiritual impetus. So we are giving a spiritual impetus to these children when these souls have come into this life. And then Prabhupada giving his own example, an example of his spiritual master, that how they both were born in very pious families. They both were Prabhupada's father, Mohan De, was a very he was a very pure devotee, and he would pray to everybody, whoever would come to his house, that hey, please be merciful on my son. Just pray that he becomes a devotee of Radharani. And so they both were and obviously Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was born in Bhakti Vinod Thakur's house. So they both were kind of the examples Prabhupada is giving. I just want to highlight here, even though Prabhupada is giving his example, it doesn't mean Prabhupada was an imperfect yogi. So Prabhupada is just showing his humility by putting himself as an example. But Prabhupada is not an imperfect devotee here. He's a perfected soul already. Okay, I just want to bring that out. This sometimes Prabhupada can go in the rasa. He's tasting it so deeply that he's suddenly forgotten about the whole existence around him. But then, because I'm not on that conscious level, I have to understand it from whatever level I am. Okay, so some things might be a bit might sound very different than they actually are. Just thought of highlighting that. So now, what happens to such a yogi who takes this birth? There's either detour or they come straight. So what happens to this yogi? That's the 43rd verse. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. Right? So he revives the divine consciousness. So I mentioned that if I left at 25%, next life, I revive it at 25%, and I carry from there. That is why you all must have noticed, when you have come to bhakti for the first time, it seems that you're making significant progress. Suddenly, hey, till last month I was chanting only 4 rounds. Today, suddenly I'm chanting 16 rounds. See, I gave up eating, non-veg. I was eating non-vegetarian food. I given that up. No tea, coffee. Hey, suddenly I'm making significant progress. But after some time, we see that, oh my God, where is that intensity gone? I'm not making that same speedy progress here. Is because the earlier part was just uncovering of my last life's work. So it's just like I was just dusting off the whatever little material covering it had, and it was easy for me. But then when I actually began my work, there where it becomes the actual progress which I have to work on. So sometimes we see that in all our lives. I've seen that myself in my life. So Krishna is now going to talk about this part. So he's talking about a word of buddhi samyogam, a phrase that Krishna is using here, which means revival of consciousness. So buddhi samyoga means we have a factual awareness of this whole concept of spirituality, that there is, I'm a soul, I'm not a body, not even like a clarity, but at least some concept. It's not like it's perfect, but then it's there. So we start endeavoring with that kind of an awareness, right? And then Buddhi Samyoga also means that the Paramatma sitting in the heart reveals to that devotee that, hey, Premnam, last life, here's where you left. You were doing few rounds here and there, but from this life, you can pick it up further. So that's what it means. Buddhi Samyoga means. Prabhupada is giving the example of King Bharat here, who took his third birth in the family of a good Brahmin, as is an example of a good birth for the revival of previous transcendental consciousness. So if you notice here, we were just talking about King Bharat here. Why did he take a life of a deer? So Prabhupada is not even bringing that part in here. So it's just like a small blip in the whole spectrum there. So he's not even talking about it. He's just going, okay, yeah, fine. You made a mistake. Krishna just gave you a slight pat on your back and say that was not a good thing. So he just let you kind of suffer so that you become more fine-tuned, and then you come to Jada Bharat. So if you notice the life of Jada Bharat, he was so cautious that he didn't want to make any mistake. He said, I don't want to do anything with this material world. I'm not going to do anything. He would act like a dumb person. His father would say, wash your hands before eating. He would only wash them after eating. He will eat with dirty hands. He would let his Brahman thread go black, dirty. So he was doing completely opposite. So, but that perfection came to him because he had gone through the birth of that deer. He had understood that, by God, a tiny mistake and had to suffer for some few years. Deer might have, I don't know how long they live, probably a few years, 10, probably might be 5-10 years. So this is nothing in comparison to the life of a human being, which is 80-90 years might be, and in those days might be even more. So it was just a small, tiny kind of a correction Krishna gave to him to purify him further. So devotees don't necessarily take when something happens to them in their lives, something negative, they don't take it as, oh my God, Krishna is angry with me. No, they see it as Krishna's mercy. Krishna is trying to bring me closer to his lotus feet. So he's giving me these tiny, samples of hardships, so that I understand, hey, not the right path. Just like sometimes, right? Like Prabhupada, I remember when Prabhupada's son was young, Prabhupada was sitting in a shop and there was a fan running, and his son would want to poke his finger in it. Prabhupada kept stopping him. No, 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 no. But then his son was not listening. So what Prabhupada did was he reduced the speed of the fan enough that it does not kind of hurt his son, like not to give a cut or cut his finger, but it would hurt him. So the son went and he poked his finger, and obviously he got hurt. At least it pained him good enough. And then after that, he didn't poke his finger. So sometimes Krishna also gives us some correction, but it's not as a correction for a materialistic person. It's where the karma, where the Maya is hitting him again and again. When we become devotees, we are under Krishna's in charge. Krishna is in charge, and then Krishna is just giving us these tiny samples so that we can correct ourselves immediately. Just like a child is going in the wrong path and you suddenly pull him back. Hey, no, that's not the right path. So the child might get angry. Hey, why are you not letting me walk that path? So, but it's Krishna's mercy. So sometimes, even though negative things happen, we don't see them as if Krishna is punishing us. We see it as Krishna's mercy coming to us. So Prabhupada is bringing the example of Jada Bharat and King Bharat here. Okay, so yes, so we revive so the important part in this verse is reviving our divine consciousness. Next one. So by virtue of that divine consciousness we had in our previous life, we automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. So now, just Sankirtan Prabhu was just telling us that he was born in a Catholic family, but then he was automatically attracted to these principles, even though his probably the environment that he was in might not have been perfectly conducive, but then he was automatically from within his heart, the Paramatma was telling him, hey, this is what you're seeking for. And that's why he kind of took up this journey. So you all must have read His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj's book, right? Journey Home. Story of a 19-year-old. He has so many yogic qualities. He's showing compassion, he's simple living, and he hitchhiked across the whole world. If you have read that book, he's going through whole world, he's hitchhiking. And then his Paramatma from within his heart is directing him. He used to get visions of this beautiful blue boy, Krishna. And he said, this is whom you have to pray to. And he kept looking. And what happened? How does Krishna work? He was on a train journey one day. Right? Just imagine he has no money, so he's like practically a brahmachari sannyasi living, no money, and he's on a train, and the train is jam packed, and so it was a 37-hour long trip, and it was just a jam packed train, and he just gets off a train at a station where the train has stopped for a few minutes just to get fresh air. And now the train is so jam packed that once the train starts moving, he can't even get back on the train. It's so jam packed. And then so what station is that? Vrindavan-dham. And now he starts asking people, which place is this? And then he meets some sages, and they say, hey, welcome. This is Vrindavan-dham, and today is Janmashtami. Right? So he was already inquisitive about yogic path, even though his family was not in those principles. That's what happens. So people who are coming from a divine consciousness of their previous life, that's what they're picking up from. And they stand above the ritualistic principles of the scripture. So they have already gone through all that. They're not going to be attracted by the karma kanda path of the Vedas. Right? So the phrase that Krishna is using is, I think, Shabda Brahma. What's that? Shabda Brahma. So Shabda Brahma means, the word Shabda means sound, right? And Brahman means, you can say that Brahma is supreme, right? One says supreme self, absolute, that kind of thing. So Shabda Brahman here refers to the karma kanda path of the Vedas, right? And Ati Vartate means the yogis transcend that, right? Generally, people use the karma kandis, use Vedas to get more entangled into it. They're looking for material prosperity. But a yogi who's coming from a divine consciousness of his past life, he rejects those right away. He's not at all attracted to them. Just like all of you. You have just right all come to bhakti, you're not attracted to it anymore. Okay, this is the verse I just quoted when Gopal Prabhu was talking to him. So let's just read the purport. Oh my Lord, persons who chant the holy name of your Lordship are far, far advanced in spiritual life, even if born in families of dog eaters. Such chanters have undoubtedly performed all kinds of austerities and sacrifices, bathed in all sacred places, and finished all scriptural studies. And then Prabhupada gives the example of Thakur Haridas. He was born in a Muslim family. But even though he was born in a Muslim family, Mahaprabhu gave him the post of Namacharya. In the Prema Dhwani that we speak after doing the Aarti, we always say, Thakur Haridas ki jai. We always praise him. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Namacharya. Because he was rigidly in his practice. So, and then Prabhupada is explaining the meaning of Shabd Brahman here, that he is surpassed all the knowledge of the Vedas. Right? So that's where we take up. So that's why we have taken up this process, because we had started in our last lives. And when the yogis engage himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. So what is the important word here again? Sincere endeavor. That's the word that we have to take in here. It's 45, sincere endeavor. Okay. So sincerity has to be there. And I've already talked a lot about it in the past. But sincerity is very, very important. So Krishna is using the word sincere, and Prabhupada, I think the purport uses determination. Prabhupada is using the word determination. We saw this in the, what was that? Utsaha nishya dhairya tattat karma pravartanat sangatyaga shato vritti sadbhir bhaktir prasiddhyati. Utsaha nishya dhairya. So utsaha is motivation, determination. Nishya is that, okay, I'm dead sure that I'm going to do it. Dhairya is patience. So determination is very important. Right? So we have to note that even this, the concept of surrendering requires trying. So there is a sincere endeavor. There is an endeavor involved in it. It doesn't mean that just sincerity will take us back. There has to be an endeavor, right? Just like Gajendra. When the Gajendra, the elephant, was caught up, he didn't just sink into self-pity. He looked up, he called the Lord, which requires endeavor. So in bhakti, there is a dual dynamic. There is dependence on Krishna, and there is also diligence on my part. So both of them are integral to devotion. For things that are in our control, we need to have diligence to do them nicely, right? And for things that are not out of our control, we depend on Krishna for them. Arjun was practicing archery painstakingly. He was doing a lot of effort. He practiced more than any one of them, right? He practiced all night also. That is how he became a champion. And his name was given the name Gudakesha. Okay. When he was fighting the war, it was not like he learned the Bhagavad Gita and he said, okay, now Krishna, I'm going to sit back. No. He fought. So it was not as if that after every arrow shooting, he was chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. No, he was completely working in Krishna consciousness. So there has to be an endeavor part. There has to be some trying also. Right? He did not just depend Krishna. Oh, Krishna will shoot the arrows for me. Right? So we have to be diligent for the things that are in our control, and for the things that are not in our control, we are dependent. Right? And similarly for Draupadi, right? Draupadi, she was trying to protect herself, but her endeavors failed. And then she finally surrendered. She raised both her hands. But then there's a difference in the consciousness of Gajendra and Draupadi. So Gajendra was completely enjoying in an enjoying mentality, but Draupadi was not. Draupadi was already surrendered. It was not as if she was not surrendered before and then she became surrendered, right? So Arjun and Draupadi, they both were in devotional consciousness and they did their best in the mood of bhakti. Okay, so Gajendra's evolution was from material to spiritual consciousness, but for Draupadi and Arjun, it was always spiritual consciousness. Okay, that's the sincere endeavor we're talking about here. Last two verses. So these last two verses, they are a summary of the entire first 6 chapters in one way. So tapasvibhyo. Tapasvibhyo is austerities. Let's read the percent now. A yogi is greater than an ascetic, greater than an empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. So ascetic, empiricist, and fruitive worker. Okay. So there is an organization in India that uses this as their catchphrase, as their motto, Tasmad Yogi Bhavarjuna. And they say, if you ask them, you talk to them, they'll say that, oh, yogi, the word, and they practice hatha yoga, those physical asanas and all that. And they say, Krishna himself is saying that. But what they have missed is that the next verse after this, they have not read that, where Krishna is saying bhakti is the more. We'll read that verse. So what's happening here is that Prabhupada is translating this yogi as a bhakti yogi. Okay. So ascetics, who are ascetics, that they are practicing all the austerities in their life. Empiricists, jnana yogis. Fruitive workers, karma yogis. So what Krishna is telling Arjun, I have talked to you about many things. Okay, I've talked to you about jnana also in the past. I talked about again a bit of jnana in the 2nd chapter. Soul, you're not a body, you're a soul, and so forth. And then I've talked about karma in the chapter 3 also. But then be a yogi, because this is the most important part. This is even better than all the other things in the ladder. Right? Prabhupada is saying when we speak of yoga, it's referring to linking our consciousness. So with the supreme absolute truth, that's what yoga means. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, and this is something we have already talked about, Asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. Empiric knowledge without surrender to Supreme Lord is imperfect. And fruitive work without Krishna consciousness is a waste of time. All these three things, jnana, karma, and dhyana, they can be successful, but if there is no connection to Krishna, they will always remain imperfect. So that is why bhakti yogi is the direct process. You can take a detour. We can do speculate. We can do all sorts of things, and then come to realization that Krishna is supreme, or we can come directly to bhakti, as you all have come. Okay, the most important verse. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenā antaratmanah shraddhavan bhajate yomam se sa me yukta tamo mataha. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. This is the first time now Krishna has talked about me so many times, right? Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenā antaratma shraddhavan bhajate yo mam. So sa me yukto mata. Now Krishna is giving a prelude to what he's going to speak in the next 6 chapters, bhakti. So he's giving a prelude to that right here. And so, right, among all the yogis, in all types of yogis, person who always thinks of Krishna as his goal, has firm faith in him, and renders service to him. There are 3 things that Krishna is saying. Mad gatenantaratmana. So gatenantar means, what's that? Thinking of me. Okay. Second one is shraddhavan. He has faith in me. And then what he is doing is bhajate yomam. He's rendering service to me. So those 3 things. Okay. So such yogi is yukta tama. So 3 types: yukta, yukta tara, yukta tama. Okay. So the word yukta, where's the meaning of the word yukta? Greatest yogi, yukta. So we have talked about this word yukta here in many places, also in the past. So yukta, so as I was saying, right, there's the other paths are also not, they're just incomplete. It's not they're wrong, they're just incomplete. So a person who's practicing karma yoga and jnana yoga, he's yukta. Person who's practicing ashtanga yoga is yukta tara. And the person who's practicing bhakti yoga is yukta tama. So it's like perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. So there are 3 levels of comparison, 3 degrees of comparison: good, better, best. Right? So chapter 3, 4, 5, they were yukta. This 6 was yukta tara. And now Krishna will talk about yukta tama, which is bhakti. Right? So Prabhupada says one thing. I don't know if I highlighted that section. Yeah, I don't know. So in this verse, bhajanti is used. Bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or any other common living entities. Any other common living entity, right? So, so Prabhupada is saying the culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in bhakti yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in bhakti yoga. So again, remember that ladder we have talked about. They all are stepping stones to eventually come to bhakti. Right? Everything has to come to bhakti. I try to gain knowledge, and eventually I understand from that knowledge that Krishna is supreme. I practice Ashtanga yoga. What is it? I realize Krishna is sitting in my heart. And then when bhakti yoga, and let's just read this section actually. From the beginning of karma yoga to the end of bhakti yoga is a long way of self-realization. Karma yoga without fruitive results is the beginning of the path. When karma yoga increases in knowledge, it becomes jnana. When jnana increases meditation on the super soul, it becomes ashtanga. And when one surpasses the ashtanga and comes to the point of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, it is called bhakti yoga, the culmination. Right? Factually, bhakti yoga is the ultimate goal. But to analyze bhakti yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name: karma yogi, jnana yogi, dhyana yogi, raja yogi, hatha yogi. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of bhakti yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga. Just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which is the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune that one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. So the important point here is that all paths progress ultimately towards Krishna. But if a person gets stuck on a particular level on this progression, then the person doesn't get the destination of Krishna. So if by demigod worship, which is within the modes, one transcends and ultimately comes to the Krishna worship, then the demigod worship is progression that will lead to Krishna. But if I just stick to demigod worship and I think, oh, demigods are all in all, they are my ultimate goal of life, then demigod worship will lead me to a different destination, right? So that is a progression. This is a progression that is being talked about. And so there is a progression of both the sadhya and the sadhana, right? We talked about sadhya is the goal, sadhana is the practice. So if our goal is Krishna, then all these progressions can eventually lead us to Krishna. But if our sadhya, the goal becomes different, then the progression will stop. Right? So everybody can progress from Brahman to Bhagavan. So anybody can go from demigod worship to Bhagavan. Anybody can go from karma yoga to Bhagavan. But if a person gets stuck at a particular sadhya or sadhana, then that person gets a different destination from what is the ultimate intended destination according to Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita has a ladder. It has a place for every single living entity, but in a sense of progression. And in this progression, the highest is sadhya is bhakti. Highest sadhana is bhakti. Sorry, sadhya is Krishna, and the highest sadhana is bhakti. That's the ultimate of what Krishna has talked about till now. So we have completed chapter 6. Perfectus. Finally, we did it. Okay, that's it. That's it from me. Thank you very much. I'll stop
Hi,
here.
Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I have a question for this last
Yes, Prabhu.
topic. So even if we don't get to that final destination of Bhakti Yoga, we veer off and we go on another path.